Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity, community service, volunteering, and we're spreading the positivity here. Always about the positive vibes here on the podcast. And this week, I've got a very, very special guest. You may know her as Alexandra York or Marlena. Most of all, you may know her as one of the most iconic managers, as well as one of the most legendary WWE divas of the Attitude Era, also a former WWE Hardcore Champion. I'm pleased to welcome
for 17 seconds.
For 17 seconds.
God awful.
The one, the only, Terri Runnels. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the show, Terri.
Stanley, if they only knew what we've been through to be at this moment right now. They have no idea.
Oh, man.
The pain, the pressure, the sweat, the tears, everything. Okay, it's basically my fault because I suck at technology, so it's all my fault. But yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you and your fans. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Let's get started here. Were you a big fan growing up of professional wrestling?
That would be a big no. The only thing I knew about pro wrestling was we will be intermittently Wilhelmina. We'll be distracted by her every so often, but it's okay. She's all good. She's used to being on Wilhelmina, come say hello to the folks. That way when you come in and out, they'll know who you are. Come here. Turn around.
Oh,
play to the camera. Play to the camera, my child. All right, so this is Wilhelmina. She's a rescue, and she's the world's best dog. Anyway, so my first memory of professional wrestling was when my father, I can't call him a dad because to me, a dad is someone who's present and there and, helps out, with homework or tells you he's proud of you or, yeah, that was not that was my father. That was not my dad. But in order, and I didn't even realize this back in the day, but in order for me to get close to my father, for him to somehow try to like me as his daughter, I would sit on the couch with him and watch football. Or, every once in a while, wrestling would come on. He would, stop on that for a little bit. The only people I remember are Wahoo McDaniel, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, and Dusty Rhodes. And, yeah, but it was just, that didn't mean anything to me other than the fact that, if I sit here and watch this with him, he's going to like me. How sad is that to have to say, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible. But so that is my first memory of wrestling, which was not a positive one at all. So, yeah.
Wow. Your father was into the manly sports, as you would call it, the football, the wrestling. That was like your first exposure to it. And I know, doing some research on your career, you worked for CNN and did a lot of the makeup for Larry King, as well as some of the wrestlers that would come by through that area. Tell me about what that experience was like. That's pretty cool.
Okay, so those are two very different experiences. So Larry King was completely out of Washington, D.C. And the wrestling was when Jim Crockett flew his guys in on Saturday and Sunday to film at Techwood Studios, which is what Ted Turner owned. And so, and this was right before, actually, it was like in the middle of him going forward with CNN, when people called it chicken noodle news, and people said, Who wants to watch news 24 hours a day? Like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Well, turns out people do, and they want to watch all kind of things 24 hours a day, right?
Hmm.
So, Ted Turner was very adept at knowing and predicting the future of what TV would be. So, because I was the low man on the totem pole, I got my job. I digress. I got my job. And let me say this to you. I recently heard something about Meghan Markle, whom I can't stand. And people were like going, she repeats the same stories over and over again. And like I've been told by fans, well, if you don't repeat the same stories, then some of us don't get to hear them. So I was like, well, shit, I don't want to be Meghan Markle S. I don't want to be all about me. Um, but the whole thing that some fans told me about, they're like, well, dude, if we haven't heard that story and you don't tell that story, then we miss out. So it kind of made me feel a little bit better, just a little bit better. But so the way I got my job at CNN was, and if anyone looks at my fingernails, you'll know that I'm way overdue for my nails to be done. I'm so sorry. Wilhelmina, they look terrible. Mm. So I was in Atlanta. I'd gone to a fashion college there. And my father refused to pay for my second year at college. And so I basically had to leave and go back to Live Oak, Florida. And he said, if you want to go to school, your mother's going to have to pay for it. I'm not paying for it. Hey, thanks again, Dad. So anywho, I went back to my little small hometown and I was doing a graphics for the newspaper there, the Swanee Democrat. And I was so miserable. Like, this town was not meant for me. Like, I did not belong in this town. And um, so I called one of my professors at Bauder Fashion College. Now, listen, don't misconstrue that with Duke or Yale, or like, don't misconstrue. I went to Bauder Fashion College, which was in the basement of Phipps Plaza. If you know Atlanta, you know Phipps Plaza. Anywho, so I'd gone back to Live Oak. I was miserable. I called one of my professors and I said, I've got to get out of here. Like she goes, I'll give you a call back. She goes, my hairdresser is looking for someone to answer the phones, sweep the floors, shampoo, wash towels. Are you willing to do that? And I'm like, yep, yep, yep. I'm going to come up there and I'm going to do that. So I went up there, and so I happened to. It was quite an elite salon, and one of the anchors from CNN that had come in was Susan Lisovich. And so while I'm doing her hair, while I'm washing her hair, I said to her, I'm like, who's in charge of makeup at CNN? And her mistake was telling me the name Ramona Horton. And I called that poor woman every day on end until she finally was like, oh my God, okay, come in, I'll give you an interview. And I went in, and she very exasperatedly said to me, this is Patrick Greenlaw, do his makeup, he's on in 60 seconds, 1 minute, minute and a half, something like that. And I'm like, damn. So I did it. He went on air. She said, you're hired. Ace, thank you very much. So, but because of that, I was the low man on the totem pole. So on Saturdays and Sundays, I had to do wrestling. And so, I would do wrestling for not only like Tony Schiavone, Jim Ross, don't do that. But also, some of the wrestlers. And so it was just, that was part of my job. And it wasn't until Ole Anderson had Tony Schiavone take me out to lunch at the Omni CNN Center, and Tony threw it out to me like, how do you feel? Would you like to do this? Is this something you'd like to do? And I said, like, yeah, but what are we talking about
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
And the only thing that I had to do with that character was her name. Like, I created everything for Marlena. Like, that was my entire concept.
Mhm.
For Alexandra York, zero zilch my concept. I basically, came up with her name, and that was it. Um, and and so it was I don't know. I don't know how much of an amalgamation it was betwixt Tony and Oli, and I still to this day need to ask Tony this. But yeah, like, so I started doing this, so I had to be at CNN, not wake up. I had to be at CNN at 4 in the morning, which meant I have to leave my house at 3:30 at the latest, because I lived 30 minutes away from CNN. And then when I got off of work at noon with CNN, I would either drive or fly to where we were doing TVs for WCW. And sometimes I got home in time to get an hour or two of sleep. Sometimes I got home to get a shower and go right back into CNN. Um, and I still don't remember. It was somewhere in Alabama. I think it was Montgomery, Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, where I heard someone say, "Watch her. I don't think she's going to make it." And I remember walking to the ring with Terrence Taylor. Um, and I remember grabbing hold to a ring post. I was not in character at all. As we walked back from the match, which I was not engaged in any way, I lost sight in one of my eyes. And they sent me to the hospital. And overnight, they did all these tests on me, right?
Mhm.
And they said, "Ma'am, we think you're just exhausted." And I know you hear that a lot with celebrities, like, "Oh no, well, they were exhausted." Well, I can tell you right now, that was probably as close to the damn truth as you could get. Every time they would try to do an MRI on me, they would have to go in there and say, "Ma'am, you're snoring, and we can't get a read, on your MRI. We need you. We need you to be really still and not snore." And so after all the tests and everything, they were just like, "You're exhausted," which made total sense. So then I finally decided, okay, I'm going to quit one or the other. And I had more fun with wrestling than I did with CNN. Um, but yeah, it was a tough, it was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah, and sometimes when you have 2 jobs like that, it can be very stressful and hard to commute back and forth to wherever you go because it's a lot. It's a lot on you, it's a lot on your body and your health. It takes a toll, and it seemed very scary, going from one area to another, especially if you're going to a place that's far from where you're supposed to be working during the day. Now, when you get to the point where you're on television as this character, were you at all nervous getting into this role? Did you do any acting prior to going into wrestling theater?
Yes. Community theater in Live Oak, Florida. That, baby, that cannot consist of being like any kind of tutorial or training. Um, but it was fun. It was fun.
You definitely earned your place over the years with the work that you've been able to do. And we want to touch on that throughout the podcast. You mentioned earlier, well, before we get into the stuff with Marlena, what happened with your exit from WCW? Why did you leave the company?
This is hilarious. I got pissed off at Dusty because he was being so, once he found out I was dating his son, he basically said that I was screwing Stanley Caston, which I'm going to tell you about that, Stanley. Very dear Stanley to my heart, but not the Stanley that he accused me of being with. Yeah, he called me a gold digger. He called me all this stuff. Meanwhile, I didn't know anyone anything. I had massive savings. I'd bought property in downtown Atlanta. Dustin had never paid his taxes before. I helped him, get all that solved. I'm like, how do you think I'm gold digging on your son that is like not even stepped into the business yet? So we had that little tete-a-tete. But I remember him being nasty to me one night, and Dustin mattered to me more than the business. And I walked out. I just walked out, drove home, walked out, and said goodbye. And I don't remember the impetus of that, but I remember it being something that offended me so deeply that I was just like, not going to do this.
Yeah, I mean, you had to do what you had to do to stand up for yourself and do what's right during a time when things didn't work out the way that you wanted them to. And so you left, I believe you're in WCW for what, the early 90s?
Well, if you go back to me doing makeup, it was in the late 80s.
Late
And
80s.
then, yeah, like 86, 87. Yeah. So, but for being Alexander York, yeah, the early
Yeah,
90s.
early
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah.
Were you looking at going to WWE earlier than, because you made your debut in 96?
I wasn't looking at going anywhere. So Dustin and I had the downtown property. He moved in with me in my downtown property. And again, I love that I'm the gold digger, but yet, I had a property in downtown Atlanta that I owned. But and I love Dusty. Dusty's such an amazing character. He was a great, awesome grandfather to Dakota. But I think he just made some mistakes in the beginning, and assuming things that he shouldn't have assumed. But so yeah, Dustin was like, I don't want to live in the city. So we bought a house out in Stockbridge, Georgia. And yeah, so that's where we were. And I don't know if you remember this, but Dustin got fired from WCW because he gigged. And, back in the day, you did what your agent told you to do. And especially like this was not an in studio match. This was a match in the back of an 18-wheeler with helicopters over it.
Yep.
So whatever your agent told you, you were going to do, you were going to do. You would not have usurped the agent and said, oh no, I'm not gigging. No, I'm not doing that. No, you would have assumed that your agent had information from the office saying, this is what we want. So the fact that, Dustin gigged, and I will never forget it. We were in our kitchen in Stockbridge, and they called and they said, we have to let you go because you gigged. And my Graham was his agent for that match. And it sucked. It really sucked. I remember going to the grocery store and writing a check for food that I knew we didn't have the money for. I don't even think I've ever said that to anyone before. But it was in that interim moment betwixt WCW and Dustin going, to WWF. And yeah, and I remember calling my mom saying, I need help. Like, I need help. I just wrote a check, but I don't have money to cash.
Wow.
And so anyway, so like when Vince first came to Dustin with the idea of Goldust and everything, I remember just being devastated for Dustin, being devastated for my child. Dakota was like a year and a half old. And I was down in our basement, which is where we had our gym and my tanning bed and everything. And I was laying there and I was just I do some of my best thinking, running and in the tanning bed. Don't ask me why. I guess because you kind of are a captive audience to your own brain.
Everybody's
So,
got their thing.
right. Yeah. So like when I would run or when I would tan, I would process and think about so many things. And so I came up, I said to myself, what is it that WWF is missing? They had Scary Sherry and they had Tammy Sitch. Well, Scary Sherry was, this wild, eclectic, crazy, female. And then Tammy was this kind of like pom pom wielding cheerleader type, you know. Well, we all know, right?
Mm-hmm.
She was amazing. Both of them were. But I was like, there's a component here where females are concerned that they're missing. And I came up with this, like literally laying in the tanning bed, I came up with this idea for this character. And because I used to love to drink wine in the bubble bath, smoke cigars in a bubble bath, I just thought they need and because Dustin was this old school actor, that they had made him.
Hollywood, yeah.
Yeah, which was kind of weird, but nevertheless, he's an actor, right? So I thought, wouldn't it be great if they had old school female just elegance and eloquence and the train dress and just all this stuff.
Like the Marilyn
And
Monroe
so,
type of character.
yeah, and I just came up with all these concepts and I called Dustin and he said, I love it. And I said, okay, will you tell Vince? And, he goes, I'm not telling Vince. Well, back in the day, Dustin was scared as hell of management, of hierarchy. He did not do well with that at all. He was scared to death of it. So he said to me, he goes, no, if you want to do that, you've got to call Vince. Well, I'm not going to just sit by and let something like that pass by if I think it's a good concept. So I called and I left a message and Pat Patterson called. Pat Patterson called me back and said it was almost like an obligatory response. He was like, "Well, we really appreciate your thoughts and your ideas, but we're just not willing to go with them right now. Okay, thank you, goodbye." And I was like, "Fine, like no big deal." Like I had a year and a half old daughter. That's all I needed. It was only that I had come up with this idea, that I was even calling. So I think it was like 2 months later, maybe. And I'm at my grandparents' home in Branford, Florida. So small, it does not even own a damn red light. It only owns a yellow light, a caution light. That's when you know you live in a small town.
Sure.
Okay. So I was sitting at my grandparents' home in Branford, and Dustin called me and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm at Granny's house. What are you doing?" And he goes, "Pack your bags. They want to do your idea." Now this is like long after I have like, you know, they told me thanks but no thanks, and no big deal, right? So I'm like, say what now? Like they do? They want to do my idea. Yeah, they do. So like literally everything about that. There was one thing that Vince did control, and I had two ideas. One was either to walk to the ring with a glass of wine or to walk to the ring with a cigar, which is how I took my bubble baths. My bubble baths were with a glass of wine and a cigar. And he said, no, do the cigar. So then, I told my two names were either Oscar, because that fed into the whole
Mhm.
actor
Yeah.
gimmick for
Oscar
Dustin,
awards. Yeah. Oscars.
right? And I went with Marlena. Marlena Dietrich was she was the one back in the day that wore pantsuits. She smoked cigars. I came up with Marlena instead of Oscar. To be honest, I like Oscar better because I thought that bled more into the male persona. The funny thing is, I remember Vince like sitting at Gorilla saying to me, "Do not light that until right before you go out, on the Titantron." And then years later, he's on the cover of Cigar Aficionado. I'm like,
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing
"Hello,
that.
liar, liar, pants on fire. You did not want me to light that cigar until I walked out, from the curtain. You couldn't just go out and buy a gold dress unless it was like Christmas time or prom time. We would do fittings every week. It was god awful.
Goldust and Marlena. I mean, this was at a time where we weren't quite yet at the Attitude Era. We were on the cusp,
We were
but
so on the cusp.
we were on the cusp of the Attitude Era. But it's really one of those things where you had like all these different characters because you had the Undertaker, you had Mankind, you had Goldust, and you had Marlena, and it really just
Austin.
Austin.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
the list goes on and on. But the cool thing about the Goldust character and the Marlena character was that it really started to bring an edge to the product. It really it set the tone for what was to come. What made it so special, those characters, in your opinion?
We literally were um almost dancing on the precipice of something where either we're going to fall and it's going to be detrimental and horrible, or it's going to land and it's going to be amazing. And it ended up being amazing. Um, you know, I give so much credit to Dustin because so many of the boys, they didn't want to wrestle him. They were like, nah. I don't want to call them, homophobic, but they were really, really not happy wrestling him in the beginning of that character. You
Because
know,
of those things?
oh yeah, yeah. And ironically, one of the people that he not only supported, but she supported him was Chyna. She was like, I want to lift you and laud you. And so yeah, but it was like Scott Hall, bless him. He wanted nothing, like he was so pissed off like when I made my debut. Um, what was it, Rumble '96, I think.
Yes. Yep.
Um, he was not a happy camper. And I give Dustin so much credit for just, holding strong and being being that character and not letting anyone make him feel less than because he was that character. He owned that character. I mean, 6'5" tobacco chewing Texan owned that character. It was not easy for Dust to do what he did, and he did
No,
it beautifully.
it was perfect. And the two of you complemented each other so well, like with your outfits, your costumes, and just the mannerisms really made the presentation just so cool.
Well, and you know, when we would go out to the ring and you got this massive heel hate, food, drinks, everything thrown at you, you know, in mine and your world, in reality, that would hurt. That would make us sad. That would make us
Mhm.
disappointed. That would make us so many things. But in this world, it made us so proud that we were evoking that emotion in these fans. And so we were just very thankful for that. And um, did it make me happy that I had to like get cheese sauce from like cheese and tortillas out of my hair? But did it make me happy that we had evoked that emotion? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing your job. You know when you're doing your job correctly. You know you're doing your job right when people are just booing the snot out of you and reacting to what you're doing like in a negative way. So kudos to you for being able to, put up with that and take it all in stride. Because it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. So you and Dustin Goldust with your characters, as we talked about, ushered in this edgy product that we now know as the Attitude Era, along with several others, of course. But um, you had mentioned Chyna earlier, and she was another big proponent of that period when it comes to the females and the women. I've read so many stories about you both, being good friends. What can you tell me about Joni, about Chyna?
The most precious stories that I can tell you about Joni was her relationship with Dakota. Um, so basically, when I signed my contract with Vince, I said to him, I will not do house shows. I'll only do TVs and pay-per-views. And so that basically left me to doing only the highly exalted um, shows and matches with her. And I will never forget, when she made her debut, um, we're backstage and we're talking about, what the agents, Vince, wanted to happen. And I remember saying, like, please, I beg of you, don't make it look sour. Please make it look amazing and real. Like, just don't worry about me. Just give it to me. And she's like, are you sure? And of course, Joni was way bigger than I was. And I said, I'm absolutely sure. I want this to not only be your amazing debut, but I want everyone to feel what I'm feeling. And yeah, so it was a really amazing debut for her, I felt. And I love being a part of that with her.
Just by all accounts, she was just a sweetheart. And WrestleMania 13 was another iconic memory because I know you were in Dustin's corner versus when he was wrestling Triple H with Chyna in his corner. Any memories of that match?
um, it was almost too iconic for me to remember. Like I was so overwhelmed by everything that was happening. Um, I do remember, you know, that night me not being able to move the next day. But one of the most precious things that ever happened was hold on, I have hair in my eyeballs. Um Dakota loved Joni so much. Her name that she gave her initially was Miss Big Joni. Didn't tell her to call her that. Whatever. That was just Dakota's name for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she hold on one second. Mm. So she said, she goes, Mama, I want to go see Miss Big Joni and Hunter. And so I called up to their room and I'm like, guys, I am so sorry for this. Because Dakota had just gotten out of the shower. She was in her PJs, wet hair, you know. But she's like, Mama, I want to go see Miss Big Joni. So I called and I'm like, dudes, I am so sorry to ask you for this, but would you guys mind if she comes up and says goodnight to you guys? And they were both like, no, not at all. Like, bring her up. And so, God love her, in her little wet hair and her PJs, she went up there and she just held and hugged Joni and Hunter. Like, she was just like so happy. And, I mean, to me, that says so much when a kid reads your heart. That there you go. When a kid reads your heart, and I think Jody, went through a really troubled, sad time in her life, um, which breaks my heart. But I love that they were able to make that connection together. Not only Hunter, but also, Joni just being able to make that connection with Dakota because she loved them so much. So yeah,
That's a very touching story. Just
yeah, it really is.
very, very, very touching, emotional.
Yeah.
But the Attitude Era, was just it was such a crazy time. It was an exciting time. A lot of people have argued that it was the highest peak of pro wrestling. A lot of people have said that we haven't really seen a period like it since. In your view,
I honestly, Stanley, I don't think we'll ever see a period like that ever exist again. I really don't.
really,
I
why do you
really don't.
why do you feel that way?
Well, because because we won't be allowed to. We won't be allowed to. And the sad thing to me is that in this day and era of people, like, okay, I'll say this to you. We can no longer see blood on YouTube. We can't say the words um, um sorry, sorry. We can't say the words um um domestic abuse. We can't, like, what? No, we need to say all of those words so that we can address them. Because if we shy away from them, then how are we going to help anyone? So
Exactly.
it pisses me off when this whole thing about cancellation culture is like, and all of a sudden, like, oh, wait, what they just say? Oh, they couldn't say anything. Oh, wait, you couldn't hear them say it because they were blotted out. No, not cool. Like, grow a set and let's talk about it and figure out why it's happening. And then let's make something good come of it. that pisses me off so badly.
I can agree with that. Yes. I think that I think the more we ask questions, the better it is we find out what the answer is, and we wouldn't have this situation happen.
Yep.
With that being said, were there things that I guess you had already talked about the stuff you liked about the Attitude Era. What about some of the things you didn't enjoy as much? I know you talked about in several interviews of yours that you were not adamant about being a wrestler. You wanted to be a manager.
Yeah. The only thing that I have ever really spoken out about, I really fought against the whole I was pregnant and I had a miscarriage due to Valvinus. And I remember fighting backstage about that, like, no, 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 because Dakota's going to go to school and her friends are going to be like, your mommy was pregnant with another baby and the baby died. Like, I was just like, dude, I can't do that. And it was basically, you either do this or you lose your job. So um, I felt to myself that, Dakota and I were very open and honest with each other, and that I could tell her storyline, not reality storyline. But yeah, it sucked. I just thought that was really salacious and wrong. I just did. So
Yeah, I mean, you had to tell your daughter that you're just acting. It's a part of the job, and you just kind of have to carry on and so on and so forth.
and in defense of that, you know, for years I would say to her, "Oh, that's just Daddy putting ketchup on his, that's just he's putting ketchup on his face and stuff." Well, but then now she's like first grade, second grade, third grade. Okay, she starts
She
to
gets
go
it.
like,
She gets
yeah,
it.
yeah. So that was what made me go, I really don't want to do the storyline at all. And I think Vince Russo really hated me for that because I fought
Hmm.
so strongly against it, but I lost. I lost. And I ended up doing the damn storyline, which did not make me happy.
You were able to make the best out of a bad situation because so many fans remembered you as just an iconic manager and personality. You got to not only manage Goldust,
I
but
loved managing. Loved
yeah,
it.
you got to manage the Hardy Boys. You got to manage the Radicals. I mean,
Perry Saturn.
Harry Saturn. I
Yes.
mean, that had to have been so much fun.
I loved managing. I loved managing and I loved taking bumps from the boys. I hated wrestling the women. And I've said this so many times in so many interviews. It was not because I didn't respect and appreciate the women. I just didn't want to be a wrestler. And I would beg Vince, please do not make me wrestle. He's like, oh, kid, you're going to be great. It's going to be great. Well, no, motherfucker, it's not going to be great because I don't want to do it. I used to say to him, I'm like, Vince, like the people that achieve stardom do something that they want to do. I don't want to wrestle. I beg of you, don't make me wrestle. So, yeah, I mean, I hated, I, I respected my female competitors.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
did not
right,
want to wrestle. Love
right.
taking big bumps, like slam me through a table or throw me to the second row, do whatever. But I don't want to wrestle other women. I just didn't want to.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's understandable. And the cool thing is about the wrestling business, there's a place for everybody. If you don't want to be a wrestler,
true.
you could be a manager, you could be an announcer, you could be a referee. I mean, I don't feel like we see a lot of managers these days. I've had a lot of people that I've had on the show talk about this with me about the types of jobs and the types of roles that male or female can have. And you don't really see a lot of managers these days in professional wrestling. Do you feel they should bring that back? Do you feel there should be a healthy balance?
I mean, I think they should bring that back. I think there are so many echelons that could be brought back that would ignite a fire in the crowd, and them go, wow, haven't seen this in a while, or wow, I love this. Yes, I absolutely do.
It's like turning the channel on your television and you see something that's like eye-opening. You
Yeah,
you go, wow, what is this? I want to see this. I want to
definitely,
check this out. So
definitely. Yeah.
those are some awesome memories for sure of you as a manager getting to do that. Why don't we switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the charity work that you've done outside of wrestling? Because you've done so much for many different organizations. Tell me about some of the charity organizations that you've partnered with over the years.
Um, well, I've had some dear friends who've had children who have autism, and it's been so great to be able to go to children's hospitals and touch base with not only the parents but the children. Um, like, it's just it is amazing. I'll give you one story. Um, that actually, I'll give you two stories. Hold on one
Yeah,
second.
yeah.
Back in the day, so I was only on Raw, right?
Hmm.
And so back in the day, we taped Raw. I'm sorry, we were live on Raw, and then we taped SmackDown on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So Raw was on Mondays live, Tuesdays were SmackDown, and so that's the way we did that,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so I met a family when I used to go to New York every weekend to do a show with Jonathan Coachman. And so we would do the show at in Connecticut, and then they would send me to Times Square, and we would do the show from there. Um, and so it was a blast for me to be there live with people. And there was this one family, and this child did not want to come to me for me to hold him. And it was probably, I don't know, 1 or 2 hours before he finally would let me hold him in my arms. And so finally, I'm holding him in my arms, and his dad is standing right there beside us. And his dad started telling me about his story and how he was, terminally ill. And, these are the situations that he deals with on a daily basis. And so I was very, I believe very strongly in giving these parents my personal cell phone and saying, like, if they're going through chemo or whatever, please don't hesitate, to let them call me. If it's 24/7, I don't care. Just let them call me, right? I was talking to this family, and his dad told me, he's like, Terri, he's gonna pass. He is on the precipice of passing. And I said, give me 2 minutes, I'll call you right back. And I called Stephanie's cell phone, and I said, Steph, um, we have this kid that is he's on the precipice of passing, and he has all of the characters around him,
Yeah.
and they're playing all of the music entrances
Hmm.
to everybody.
Yeah.
And I said, is there any way for you and Vince to say something to him? I had no idea at the time that they were all in a limo heading for Seattle to do prep for the pay-per-view we were doing in the WrestleMania we were doing.
Mhm.
And so she said, yes, absolutely. She handed the phone to Vince. Vince handed the phone to take her to Stone Cold to um um hold on, Dwayne, DJ, um like all of the top
Yeah,
stars, right?
all the big names.
And I remember this because I was on my Stairmaster Tuesday. It was a Tuesday because we always flew home on a Tuesday back in the day. And like on my Stairmaster and heard everything. Like I heard everything. And it was the most amazing thing. And it was not even an hour later that he passed. He passed away. But he had spoken, spoken and heard from all of his favorites before he passed away. And like that was the most magical thing that to me, like what we did was the most magical thing that we could do to help people that were passing, that were terminal, that needed help. And I just really appreciate that from Stephanie, Paul, and Vince, and handing the phone around to everybody. You know, it was amazing, and I was just very appreciative of that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's a tearjerker. I
that
mean,
was yeah.
to have like some of your favorite heroes
Oh my God,
talk to somebody on the phone just before
that's
they're about to
that's
die.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And I really believe that him hearing their voices was a special pass for him to go into the next world and the next life, and to, you know, it was amazing.
Yeah, and you got to be a part of that.
Well, I mean, I all I did was ask, but they were the ones to give the gifts. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, what is it about helping other people? What is it about helping other people that really puts a smile on your face?
Oh, babe, you're gonna kill me here. Oh my gosh. It's everything to me. What really matters to me is that so many of us in this life, we take things for granted. We just, you know, we bitch about stuff, we fuss about stuff, we're like, whatever. Um, we don't even realize that. Um, imagine this. Imagine you go to sleep tonight, tomorrow, tomorrow night, whatever, and you need help to go to the bathroom. You can't get yourself there. You need help to get food, to get anything. Like you cannot function on your own. That shit is important. And I just feel like we bitch about stuff that doesn't really matter.
Oh,
And we just should be appreciative of all the blessings, gifts, and everything that we have.
yeah.
There are some people who are I'm trying to think if they're are they Instagram, or are they, I don't know what they are, but like I love, there are some of these people that are
like they go up to people and say, you know, I need $1. Can you give me $1?
Yeah.
And then that person gives them $1, and then that person gives them 500, $1,000 back, and just says, I just wanted to give something to someone that was kind and gracious.
Yeah.
And uh, that's just my heart and my soul. Like, I don't want people to be taken advantage of, and I don't want people to like sit there and like need, but nobody ever gives. I don't even know how to say it. It pisses me off. I've seen a couple of videos where people are like, "Oh, well, people who are doing that, they're taking advantage of the poor and the weak." Well, I don't see it as taking advantage of. If you're trying to help them, hell, absolutely do that. Help them. I don't see that as you know I don't know. Anyway, um, but I digress. Anyway, I'm thankful for people who are doing good in the world, and yeah, that's all.
I didn't mean to get you emotional there, but you definitely are a kind-hearted person. Just for me getting to speak with you here, and I just want to say that it's been an honor to be able to talk with you about this and about your career, and it means a lot to me and the listeners to have you on the show. And I just want to say thank you very much.
Stanley, I appreciate you, and one day I do want to tell you the story of my Stanley. Okay,
Yes.
we'll do that another day.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I also got to meet you a few years ago. I forgot to mention this at the top of the show. I actually met you at a wrestling event in Nashville a few years ago, and meant a lot to me to get to meet you. And
Wait, tell me about that meeting,
yeah,
please.
yeah, real quick. It was at an Overdrive Pro Wrestling show. I think you were the general
Yes,
manager. Yeah.
yes.
So it was just an honor to get to meet you there, and just want to say thank you again for everything.
So that was with the owner of Overdrive.
Yes,
So that was Frank. You know who Frank is, yes?
I've heard of him. Yes, I believe I
Yes.
have heard of him.
He owns Overdrive. So he is so special to me that I've asked him to actually speak at my funeral. Whenever that
Oh,
is, I don't know when that will be. It could be tomorrow, could be 10 years from now,
we
20,
ho-
I don't know what.
we hope it's not anytime soon.
We hope it's not, but he means that much to me that I've asked him to speak at my funeral, and he knows that. My daughter knows that, and he's such a great soul that yeah, you can't find too many people that are as gracious as he is.
No,
So yeah, he's special. So anyway, I will digress and let. I know we need to hop off this, but um, I appreciate everything that you have brought into my life, and I thank you.
where can people find you on social media? They want to
Only
reach
at
out.
the Terri Runnels. Only at the Terri Runnels.
Yeah.
Instagram and Twitter. Yes, I am at the Terri Runnels.
All right.
All right, babe.
All right. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank
Means a lot to
you for
me
your
and the listeners.
patience.
And yeah, you're welcome. And you're more than welcome to come back on the show.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Stanley.
Yeah.
Remember, we have a story to talk about Stanley's.
Yes. Next time, part 2. It'll
All right.
happen.
All
All
right,
right.
baby.
Take care.
Thank you. Night, night.
Bye-bye. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.